Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Diversity and Inclusion in Theater panel. My name is Samantha. I'm a librarian at the Winona Public Library, and I will be the moderator for this panel. This panel is made possible with funds from the Minnesota Arts and Culture Heritage Fund and Legacy Dollars from Selco, and is also part of the Waking Up White Regional Read. To learn more about the book, Waking Up White by Debbie Irving and upcoming events, please visit the website laxwakingupwhite.com. To find a copy of the book, please visit your local public library or a little library near you. For those of you who have not read the book, Waking Up White, it was written by a white woman, Debbie Irving, who over time discovers that being white has offered her more advantages than being a person of color. After the event, participants will receive a survey regarding the event. Filling out the survey allows us to bring more programs like this in the future. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping things to cover. The panel discussion will be recorded and placed on the library's YouTube channel. All attendees are asked to have their cameras off and their mics muted. For the first 45 minutes of the panel, we will cover pre-selected questions. In the last 15 minutes, attendees may submit questions in the chat or unmute themselves to ask questions. Finally, all views expressed today are not necessarily the views of the Winona Public Library, the Waking Up White Regional Read, or the Minnesota Arts Cultural Heritage Fund and Selco Legacy Fund. Now, to introduce our panel. First up is Erin Young. Erin is the managing director of Great River Shakespeare Festival that takes place every summer here in Winona. Melissa Maxwell is also from Great River Shakespeare Festival and is the co-associate artistic director. Eileen Muller is the managing director of the Frozen River Film Festival, which happens in Winona every February. Eileen was formerly with Great River Shakespeare Festival as the marketing director. Finally, we have Jacqueline Johnson from Commonwealth Theater Company in Lanesboro, Minnesota. Commonwealth's current 2021 season is in full swing until the end of this year. You can find out more information about each of these events by visiting their websites. Okay, and now to get the panel started. So as I mentioned, we have pre-selected questions that all of the panelists have seen ahead of time. And panelists, any of you can jump in and answer any of these questions at any time. So my first question, on June 8th, 2020, We See You White Theater released a letter entitled Dear White American Theater, with signatures of over 300 plus Black, Indigenous, people of color theater makers. In the letter, there's a list of demands: equitable precedents, code of conduct, and transformative practices. What have your organizations done to respond to this letter? Who wants to go?
I'll jump in and Aaron can certainly chime in with me. Great River immediately got together, the leadership team, and we had, I'm going to estimate maybe 12 staff meetings in a row. But every week we sat down and we took the document in chunks. We read through it and we discussed how we wanted to approach that segment and what kind of changes we wanted to make because of it. So we came up with a 5-year plan, and we posted a document that explained what we had done to date, even previous to the document, and then the changes we wanted to make because of the document. So we had a 6-month, a year, a 3-year, and a 5-year plan.
And one thing that I thought was interesting about the document, so it's a 32-page document. And there's a lot there to unpack. But one of the things that struck me as I was going through the document and looking at who the signatories were, it dawned on me that I had worked with several of those people in my career at different theaters. And I realized, oh, these are people who have had experience working with me, not just working with other people, because I like to think, oh, I'm one of the good producers. But it made me stop and think, wow, were there things that I was doing that might have added to the concerns that were in this document? And so it was very personal when you realize that the people who were responding who were creating the demands were people that I knew and had worked with. And I think one of the things that really kind of struck me was a lot of the issues that were brought up in the document weren't just related to the BIPOC community, but really to any vulnerable community. And we started to realize the way that we produce theater as an industry, not just, you know, at Great River Shakespeare Festival or at Commonweal Theater, that the practices of the industry on a whole can be very unhealthy, and unhealthy environments tend to impact those who are vulnerable first. And that was a real eye opener to see if we make our businesses more healthy, then everyone benefits, but the vulnerable communities the most, which is wonderful.
And as a single person with no children, I would say what struck me the most about the document is how much it affected families or single parents who had childcare to think about, which is never a consideration of mine. So it was really useful to see the ways in which our business does not take that into account.
Yeah, similar to Great River Shakespeare Festival, reading through the document was really eye-opening, and I honestly felt an immense amount of gratitude of seeing a path forward. Many of us feel so motivated to be parts of the solutions to the problems. And when you're faced with a problem, such as what's being unfolded in We See You White American Theater, you don't know how to kind of take the first step. So our organization, we spent some time through the leadership team distributing that and making sure that we've all had some time to read it. We held a diversity and inclusion workshop that allowed the whole staff to be involved, which was a little risky. It was one of the first things that we did in the middle of COVID, and we did a lot of, preparations to test and make sure that we were doing that safely and responsibly, and came together to be able to do that, sort of beginning that work and beginning those conversations. And after that, formed a anti-racism committee, which is made of some board members and some staff members, and that team is currently doing the work that Great River Shakespeare has already done, which is cataloging some of the work that Commonweal already does culturally as part of our work culture, and then also figuring out how to set some goals so that we can monitor our growth and envision a way forward for the organization that's specific to the work that we're doing. And we were really lucky to have that guideline of We See You White American Theater, but also a lot of other theater companies that that have been doing the same work, and being able to sort of see that work being done across the industry has been a huge help to us, as well as we sort of try to figure out what works for the Commonweal model and our artist administrator model, and try to put some benchmarks forward so that we can ensure that we're setting some goals for ourselves that we can hold ourselves accountable to.
I think one of the things that I found most illuminating was, just as someone who has been in the theater industry for less time than a lot of my colleagues, was thinking about a lot of the demands that were brought up and that we really wanted to meet, but at the stage that we were in didn't really apply to Great River Shakespeare Festival at the stage we were at, as far as year-round, being seasonal, and the relationships that larger theaters may have with more corporate sponsors or with larger contracts. And, you know, it's really easy to say, well, that doesn't apply to us, so we don't need to deal with it. But there was definitely an element of thinking about, well, at some point we may be at that level. And so what can we do now to set us up so that we don't have those issues down the road?
Yeah, I had, as we look at the size of, you know, what we're doing here in, you know, in southern Minnesota, you know, sometimes we think, oh, what we do in southern Minnesota ripples only in southern Minnesota. And at the beginning of all of this movement, I realized that it didn't. It actually has ripples around, you know, the country and around the world. And we started hearing from people who had been interns with us, who had experiences at other theaters, who posted on social media about their experiences at these other theaters being marginalized, having two sets of standards, you know, one for white company members and a different one for BIPOC company members. Even though it wasn't stated, it was what was, you know, evidenced in their practices. And this one company member said in particular, if I hadn't have had an opportunity as an intern at a, you know, theater in southern Minnesota, they didn't name us particularly, but I knew who she was talking about. She said, I wouldn't have known that there was a standard that that I should expect to be treated. And so I started looking at our company and where people go when they come to work with us. They don't just stay in the area. Some people do stay in the area, but a lot of people go and they work in regional theaters around the country. They work on Broadway, they work in film and television, and the experiences that they have here help shape what their expectations are of the industry as a whole.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Okay, audience, this next question has a lot of context, so bear with me on this. Change the stage, and by the way, it's hashtag change the stage, is a call to event organizers to create inclusive stages and spaces, be it live or on screen, by elevating unrepresented voices. By taking the pledge, you agree to 1, develop a strategy to create more diverse, equitable, and inclusive experiences for the communities we serve. 2, host stages, digital or physical, that feature a diverse set of perspectives by creating opportunities for underrepresented voices. This includes, but is not limited to, members of marginalized races, genders, sexual orientation, and ability. 3, drive data benchmarking efforts of content to help establish benchmarks and data for change the stage community. 4, contribute to the change the stage community by providing transparent feedback and maintaining an honest, open dialogue. And 5, accept that our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion means a dedication to constant learning. We will make mistakes, but we are determined to learn from them and to improve. So, panelists, have you heard of the pledge? And if so, has your organization taken the pledge? Why or why not? Anybody?
Well, I can jump in and just admit that until I saw this question, I had not heard of the pledge. And so I was excited to read through these goals and these expectations of the pledge. And it's certainly something that I've then since brought to our anti-racism committee to sort of see if this isn't parallel. And certainly a lot of the work that we're doing right now in trying to put those benchmarks down for We See You White American Theater is I think addressing some of these very things. But when I reflect back on sort of the work that we did this year in a few ways that we were able to embrace work that we can do that helps to change the stage, there's a couple of cornerstones that I feel proud of and I feel happy with. Most notably, we did a recent production of Complete Works of William Shakespeare Abridged Revised, which has some problematic text in it. And I was the director of that show, and I said pretty strongly, I'm glad that the show invites us to reimagine and update it so that it feels anew and it feels relevant to our times and to the actors that are putting on the play in the moment. And so in a way that I felt confident that we could address this, we hired an amazing poet that's has some Rochester ties and now lives in the Twin Cities, Dominique Jones, to rewrite the Othello section of that play so that it was calling out sort of the questions that I was concerned with as a director of that play, and that still told the story of Othello, but also highlighted some of these very things that we need to be addressing within our industry. So that was kind of an example that I can see of us doing this work, and I'm looking forward to being able to dig into a little bit more of the Change the Stage pledge and being able to represent it a little further with Commonweal's mission.
I'm going to admit that I did not know the pledge either, but I feel it's in tandem with We See You, and both of them have a way of changing the stage. And you know, I've been a company member at Great River since 2017, but I just took the position of co-associate artistic director last year in light of the George Floyd incident. And so as a person of color, one of my interests is in changing the stage. You know, I think diversity is really important. You know, to not have diversity of voices in the stories we tell is a false narrative. People of color have been here since the dawn of time. So to tell stories in which they are not present anywhere is a false narrative. And so I'm really pleased to say that, you know, we're looking not only to increase the number of BIPOC company members we have, but also what are the stories that we are sharing with our audience. And next year we will be presenting The African Company Presents Richard III, which is written by Carlisle Brown, who is of Minnesota, right? He lives in Minneapolis, I believe. And it's an incredible historical story. You can actually Google to see reviews, but it's of an African company here in New York City in the 1800s that was doing Shakespeare, and they became so popular that white audience members started to go to their theater to see what they were doing, and the white theater owner didn't like the competition and shut them down. And that's a historical true story that needs to be told. So, and that's diversity and that's real life. So that's just the start of what we're doing. But I think it's important that all voices be heard.
One of the things I like about the pledge, and I'm with Jacqueline and Melissa on this. I hadn't heard of it until the question came out, but I like the focus on data collection and the transparency around that. And that's one of the things that we realized early on was that we were tracking diversity data, and we were prior to receiving the document, the WeSeeU document, we were about 22% BIPOC, which is significantly more than the region, but it's far less than being a majority minority company and having 50-51% BIPOC representation in a company. But when we started to kind of break that down, we realized that most of the diversity within the company was happening at the lower levels, the entry level positions, in crew members, in interns and apprentices. We did have some representation in the acting company, but we didn't have any BIPOC representation in the administrative staff, in the artistic leadership, in the directors, in the designers, those key decision makers about what is represented on this stage was all run by white people. And we realized we were missing voices. And this I've never told Melissa, but in a shockingly embarrassing moment when this talks about in this pledge about being committed to learning. And recognizing that we all, regardless of our age, are capable of change. So we brought Melissa on. She had been an unpaid consultant for us since 2017 about a lot of issues. And we said, we need to be paying her for the work that she's doing. And so, we brought her on and recognized her with a title that actually, represented what she had been doing for years for us. But it was shortly after the George Floyd murder, and we had engaged already a playwright, a Black playwright, to create a commissioned piece in response to the killing. And so we were very excited about that, and we had programmed that as one of our summer events in 2020. And then we brought Melissa on as co-associate artistic director and started involving her in the discussions. And she said, well, I would like to put together a panel about race in the theater. And my first instinct, and this is what she doesn't know, my first instinct was, no, we've already got something scheduled. We've already commissioned a play from a playwright. And my first instinct was to stop Melissa's expression of what she was wanting to explore within the company. And I thought, and I didn't say anything, which I was really happy that I shut up. But it scared me that my first instinct was to shut Melissa down. And I thought, that is the privilege that I am sitting in. And what a great learning moment to realize this is part of my character that needs to change. And so we had the panel discussion that Melissa put together, and it was fabulous. And we also did the reading of the new play, and it was fabulous. And there's not a quota of this is how many BIPOC things you can do, and if you have met the quota, then you don't have to do anything more. That was just a real great moment. So I believe in statistics.
Yeah, I didn't know about the change of stage thing either. So thanks, Sam. But obviously, like Melissa said, it falls in line with some of the goals that Great River Shakespeare Festival had already set. And one of the things that I really appreciated about the We See You White American Theater document and the information from this call to action is that you have to have specific and measurable goals, because I think one of the things that not just theater, but lots of arts programs fall into is just like, well, we welcome everyone. And it's just like this blanket thing that you just sort of lay out there. And then you're like, check, boop, done. But it doesn't actually involve any real goals. And if you don't set a specific goal of, we would like X amount of people or X amount of activities or whatever the measurable thing is, then you don't have to hold yourself accountable to anything, and you don't have to invest time and resources into it. So that was something that I was glad that we started doing was, okay, the thing that we need to really look at is our budget, because the budget, we can say all of the floofy, lovely things that we like, but if the budget doesn't reflect with material support for theater workers, then we're not actually fulfilling any of those things. So I was really excited when we went through all of this, but then we started going through the budgeting process, and then it was like, well, this kind of play always gets this much funding versus this kind of play gets this much funding. So we really need to look at that and why we're prioritizing them that way. And then one of the things we talked about was paying interns, because I don't know if folks know this, but internships are typically legally considered volunteers who get a stipend. So you're not actually a wage worker. And that means that the people who are able to intern to give up their whole summer for not earning a living wage are people who already have a certain amount of access. So that was something that we had a lot of discussions about, was who are we leaving out just from the get-go by not being able to pay people for their work. And now Great River is going to be able to start doing that in the summer, which is super exciting. So that's one of those specific measurable strategies that I think is super important in doing work like this, is that it's good to have good ideas, but there does have to be money behind it. And sometimes that means you have to look at your priorities as an organization.
Thanks, guys. Eileen, I love that you brought up equitable access, because that's a big thing in libraries right now. And I have to say that I picked the question because it was for both live and on screen. So I thought, ooh, film too. I'm sorry that you guys didn't know about it. You know, I just did my research because that's what I do. I'm a librarian, research things. So question number 3, I found the most interesting, and I don't know, it's just a really interesting thing to me because it involves data and statistics, you know, something that Erin brought up. So I'm just going to jump right into it. The Actors Equity Association, the AEA, did a diverse study in 2017, where they demonstrated hiring biases in the theater industry. In November of 2020, AEA followed up with another diversity and inclusion study. While the gap between hiring men and women is closing, less than 10% are BIPOC, less than 1% are transgender, and less than 5% are persons with disability. What are your plans to close those gaps?
Well, before speaking about the plan, I will say, as an acting company member, when I came to Great River in 2017, it's the first time, not to say that there aren't other theaters who haven't been doing it as long as we have, but it was my first time in the theater where there were transgender actors who were a part of our company. And it was the first time that I had been in an organization where, when you introduced yourself, you gave your pronouns. That was my first experience in 2017, not to say other theaters hadn't been doing it before. So I do feel as though Great River has been working toward diversity for some time now. Can we do better? Sure. But that has been our interest and our pledge for a while now.
Erin and I were both about to jump on that. I'll just jump in really quick. Similar to Melissa, when I came to Commonweal, I actually joined right at the start of 2020, which is a fantastic time to join a theater company. Jokes aside, there was a lot of things about the work culture here. Although I feel like the representation on the BIPOC community was significantly lacking, and I think our whole ensemble would admit that, and also is genuinely wants to correct that in future. There was a lot of diversity that was present and part of the culture for the ensemble and for the company, as well as for our audience. For a few years, Commonweal has had gender unrestricted bathrooms and a policy around that and verbiage around that we train our company to know, so that we're able to respond to it, because in our small rural community, there are questions, and sometimes people need some more information about that. So that was a small example. We also have, to Melissa's point, we have some, we do use gender pronouns when we're introducing ourselves, and we also have those on our signature in our emails. We have some genderqueer ensemble members, and currently an intern, and also some neurodiversity that we are being better and better about talking about and within our organization. This last year, we did a play called Dancing Lessons, which features a character that is autistic, and the other character in the play was played by one of our company members who is autistic, and seeing her joy in being able to talk about her experience through our marketing materials and have that dialogue sort of off stage with audiences virtually, unfortunately, because of this year, was really inspiring. And we're seeing that this can be a part of our mission, to tell transcendent stories, to showcase our diversity. And we look forward to being able to grow what diversity means in this organization, so that we can continue to use our relationship building sort of model as a way to be figureheads for diversity and inclusivity in our community.
I think one of the things that we saw as far as equity goes is it gave us an opportunity to really take a look at, the equity is Actors Equity is the Actors Union, and we have company members who are part of the union and company members who are not part of the union. And we wanted to make sure that we were having, representation at all levels, that we weren't just hiring white union members, but our non-union members could be Black or Indigenous or Latino, but that it was happening at all levels. And so we were very happy to see when that came out, that we did have a good, cross-section in the acting company of both at the equity level and at the non-equity level, BIPOC representation. One of the things that this festival has done since the beginning that I think kind of prepped us to be able to do that is allowing actors to speak with their authentic voice, and not, putting something on them. There's a thing that all actor training programs teach, and that is standard American dialect and the proper way to speak classical language. And that can be a colonizing effect to people who have a Southern accent, or somebody that might have, an accent from a different part of the country or a different part of the world. And so we've been allowing actors to speak how they want to represent themselves, whether it's how they were raised or what. We've had an actor who felt very connected to his African ancestors and wanted to be able to speak in more of an African cadence. And that was perfectly fine. That fits Shakespeare. And it's something that our audiences didn't go, oh, I can't understand him anymore. It's something that our audiences actually, it aids in the understanding of Shakespeare because it's authentic to the speaker. So that was exciting to see.
All right. This is my last pre-written question, and then we have one submitted audience question. But before we move into that, my last question is, your organizations have diversity and inclusion policies or statements. What was your biggest takeaway from developing these policies or statements?
I have a response to that because I am usually the one in charge of drafting those statements, which Erin is laughing about because that's what always would happen. But I am also in the process of trying to do that for the organization that I'm with now at Frozen River Film Festival, because it's a very different sort of situation here, because the film festival is primarily a presenting organization, whereas Great River Shakespeare Festival is a producing organization. So you are in charge of what the artistic result is, whereas with the film festival, we're more curating and trying to bring things in, but there is power in that as well, but it's used in very different ways. But it's the biggest takeaway I had from that process was, I think as a white person drafting that, I had a lot of angst as far as, okay, are we going to actually do something, or is this just to be like, oop, I did it, yay. Does this have teeth behind it? Are there ways for us to hold ourselves accountable so that we're following through? Is it a policy, or is it a statement? And that then the flip side of that is, I think that a lot of times it's really easy to go to the folks of color in a group and be like, well, you know how it feels, so you do this, but you're just adding more labor. So it's I think it's a good practice for the white people in a company to have to do that. And then if you want someone to check on it for you, if you want a person of color to check on it for you, first of all, knowing if they do have some expertise in crafting a statement like that, and second of all, compensating them for their time because they're doing enough as it is. So it's something that can be, you can find them anywhere online and sort of like copy paste and alter to your specifications. But once you actually start thinking about it, and if you actually care about what it does, it can be a longer process than you initially think it will be.
Eileen, I love that you said that, because that is so in line with the book, Waking Up White, and everything behind it, and white people taking charge and kind of figuring it out. So I love that you said that, because it ties into our book so well.
I'd also add to that I've been involved in diversity and inclusion training since 2000, actually. And the biggest takeaway that I learned early on is that if you want to distill diversity down to one thing, it's that everyone can bring their whole selves to work. And that's really all it's about, is including everyone in the process. That means that if you are heterosexual, understand that your gay colleagues, all they really want to do is to be able to put the picture of their family on the desk the same way that you do, without any flack, without any kind of, that they don't have to feel uncomfortable, or that someone who's transgender doesn't have to feel uncomfortable. Someone who is of a different color doesn't have to feel uncomfortable, and also doesn't have to be the spokesperson for all things Black or all things Asian or all things whatever. That they can bring their whole selves to work is the most important takeaway, I think, for diversity and inclusion. So as we think about that, what does that mean? Because we're all isolated in our own thoughts of who we are, and it's about expanding our awareness to people who may not look or sound like us, and allowing them that same space in the workplace.
Thank you, Melissa. That was really powerful in a way, what you said.
I think one thing that I would add is that as like Eileen said, it takes a lot longer to craft these statements or these plans, to create a 5-year plan than what you had originally thought. And I think a large part of that is because it involves so many people. You've got a board of directors, and you want to make sure that everyone is on board and comfortable with what is being said. And also, one of the things that our board held us to, which I appreciated, was, is this realistic? Can we do the things that we're going to say we're going to do? Because it can be more damaging to actually put a statement out there and then not be able to actually do it. And so that's been encouraging to do that. But the other thing that I quickly discovered was that that when you make statements of inclusion and diversity in our current climate, that they can quickly become political, and your motives can be questioned, and are questioned. And I think the most exciting thing about that is what your action, that your actions speak immediately for what you're doing, and that you're not just doing it because it's the current wave of popularity, but that you're doing it because it is the right thing to do, that it represents, it allows people to be their authentic self. But you will be challenged by people who question your motives. And so just making sure that you stick to the principles, and that it's the principles that guide you regardless of what political power is happening currently, and then sticking to it, because political power is going to change, and making sure that you're sticking to your plan, shows that your motives are pure and not motivated by the latest craze.
Thank you, Erin.
Go ahead, Jacqueline.
Oh, I was just going to simply say that's so inspiring to hear all three of you talk, and simply to recognize, the Commonwealth has had a diversity statement and inclusivity statement that has been a part of its core values for years now. And I feel like what has been really the big wake up call for us in the last year and a half is that there hasn't been enough action behind those words, and recognizing that is something that needs to change. That we do believe in that core value. And just like we believe in our other core values, we have to be able to put our actions behind the words. And that is that's the steps that we're working really hard to take right now to really hold ourselves accountable. And then to Erin's point, be able to measure it, because that's sort of the exciting thing that allows us to envision forward and also look past and be able to celebrate that growth and then continue it to evolve.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
I also wanted to add this as I hear my colleagues talk about how much time and money it takes for this. For anyone who's concerned about that in the audience, I want you to understand that the data, the statistics is out there that shows that diversity and inclusion is important to the bottom line. You need to do it to thrive. Black Panther, Crazy Rich Asians, Bridgerton, Hamilton are all diverse stories that show that there is money behind it, that there is an audience for these diverse stories. And truly, to stay purely white is to die off. If you look at the population and the way the world is changing, and I would even argue, not to throw stones, but Friends, which was a ridiculously popular show, wanted to lead the world to believe that New York was an all-white state. And, since the colonial days, New York has been a polyglot. The idea that there are no Black people, no people of color at all in New York is crazy. And yet they went for 10, 12 years before you saw anyone of color really enter that cafe. So the narrative is false to stay non-diverse. And think of the audiences you could be bringing in right now just by opening your awareness.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
One final thing. I think that Melissa is 100% correct. And it's something Erin mentioned about there can be a feeling of, oh, this is the in thing to do, now is to make sure that you have this statement, and that there can be sort of a fear that you'll be perceived by perhaps your donors or the community that you're just sort of following a trend. But I think it's important to remember too that can't be helped. It's something that a lot of people are waking up to, and by a lot of people, I mean a lot of white people are, and a lot of those white people are people who hold positions of power, are waking up to these things and saying, oh, we need to do something about it, and waffling about whether or not it's the right time wastes everyone's time. It's something that's important, and it doesn't make it less important just because everyone else is doing it. And I think that, we can't help that we didn't do this work earlier. It's too bad that we didn't, but we're doing it now. And I think that that's the important thing to remember. If anyone's sort of thinking about that, like, oh, I'm just jumping on the bandwagon. Well, if it's work that you need to do, then you need to do it. And it doesn't matter if everyone else is doing it right now, because it's clearly the right thing to do. It's clearly good. If it doesn't speak to your heart, maybe it will speak to your wallet.
Well, and then on top of what Melissa said as well, theater companies and film companies, they have a lot of power. And that's what it comes down to. And they need to use that power for good, and they need to show these true narratives that that there's a melting pot out there, that our communities are diverse, and so it's extremely important, I think, for these companies and these organizations that have the power to show the truth. So thank you for that, Melissa. So we had one pre-submitted audience question, and that question is, how does your diversity and inclusion strategy influence the stories you tell and how you interact with your community in the Coulee region? I should note that this person said La Crosse, but I wanted to be inclusive and include the Coulee region, since we have Winonans and Lanesboro folk here.
Well, for me, one of the things that I think of first is it puts the onus on us to be proactive in seeking out stories from the region, and being proactive in the types of stories that we tell. So that's one of the things that we realized early on, is that we're a Shakespeare festival, so we've already got the white male playwright, down, and we've been, if we're only doing one Shakespeare play, and 3 other plays by another author, can we really call ourselves a Shakespeare festival? So we realized, we've kind of got the white male thing covered, and so we need to look at, who are the other playwrights that are talking, either female, Black, Asian, Indigenous playwrights. And so one of the things that we've been doing is Melissa put together a reading series during COVID, when so many actors were out of work, that we'd get together as a company on Monday night and read plays by Black, Asian, and Indigenous authors, just to help us understand what the literature is out there that we've been missing while we've been focusing on Shakespeare and, Eugene O'Neill and Tennessee Williams, and Arthur Miller, and that there's more in that, in the playwright canon for us to explore. And then we've are excited about this project that we'll have next summer, which is a community engaged project, where we've been going to the community and collecting stories of community members, and then adapting that into a play that will be presented by our company and community members working together next summer. So that's something exciting, but it requires you to be proactive and seek it out, rather than just hoping that it will come to you.
I'd also, I'm sorry, Eileen, because Aaron mentioned O'Neill, Tennessee Williams, and Arthur Miller. I had an experience several years ago as a director. I was directing at a regional theater, and it was a play about some free people of color in, I can't remember where they were, Tennessee or something like that. And there was a deputy, a sheriff's deputy, that had them on house arrest, and he was white. So there was a white actor in the play, and we were having a get together after rehearsal, and there was a debate about something, and the white actor said, "Oh, please, I'm the only white person in this otherwise Black show." And that gave me pause, because I thought, why is it a Black show? You're in it. You're a white person in this show. So I challenge all of our audience members to stop categorizing things. What makes it a Black show? Is it because it's written by a Black author that it suddenly becomes a Black show? But if a Black author writes a show and there are all white actors in it, okay, now is it still a Black show? Because now the characters in it are white. Or is it the ratio of how many Black actors to white actors are in the show that make it Black? And there's something disturbing to me, because it makes white the gold standard and everything else other. And that play that I was directing wasn't a Black story. It wasn't a white story. It was an American story. And I'd like us to stop thinking about Arthur Miller and Tennessee Williams and, O'Neill and Shakespeare. They are the gold standard and everything else is other. Because, August Wilson is one of our greatest American writers. So why do we have to put the asterisk, but he's Black? as if that makes him different from Arthur Miller or anybody else. He can tell a story like nobody else's business. We should cherish him as the American playwright that he is, of genius. And there are so many others, whether they are, women or gay or Latinx or Asian. Why do we then have to categorize them to let everybody know, yeah, but they're not white? So I'd like us to just change our thinking around that. They're American stories and they belong to all of us.
Thanks, Melissa. That actually sort of flows well with what I had been thinking of, which was that we, thinking regionally, there's this sort of idea among white people that that there is a default, like what Melissa's talking about, that white people and white narratives are the default and everything else is a deviation from that. And that's how power is maintained, because if you can say, well, it's like when I hear people talking about objectivity in stories, it's like, well, the straight white guy is always objective and everyone else is emotional or whatever. Which is a way to keep power. And so when I think about diversity, inclusion, and talking about stories and interacting with the community in our region, it's important to remember that, especially if we're white presenters or white producers, that just because we haven't heard of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That there are lots of community members of color in our rural community, that there are more and more folks of color in rural communities, but sociological studies show that people tend to hang out in groups of people that look and talk and act like them. And so if you're not interacting with folks who are outside of your experience, you may not know that those communities are there, but that doesn't mean that they aren't there. And so a lot of times producing works that showcase different voices are a way to connect with those communities, whether or not you know they're there, and to make it really apparent that those folks are welcome in whatever space you inhabit. At the film festival here, we've gotten a lot of films this year about people in outdoor recreation, people of color in outdoor recreation, which has for so long been thought of as a white person thing to do, is hiking, biking, skiing, whatever. And it's just not the case. And I think that, these are stories from Minnesotans. And so it just, just because I don't know that person doesn't mean that that person's not in my community, is what I was thinking of.
Awesome. All right, Melissa, I love what you said too. I have a 9th grader at home and she's learning about American identity right now. And so I love that you phrased it that way, because this is something that our kids are learning in school right now about the American identity and whatnot. So I think it's really important that we phrase it that way. So thank you for that. Are there any questions from the audience? Does anybody want to submit something in the chat? You can also unmute if you want and talk. I don't care. While we're waiting for questions, I always like to try and plan ahead and make up questions, or like when I'm listening to you guys talk, I like to think of questions as you speak. And I was thinking, so Great River Shakespeare Festival, and Aaron, you kind of already touched on this a little bit. Shakespeare is a white Anglo-English dude, okay, right? And so what is Great River Shakespeare Festival doing to attract company members who might necessarily be afraid? Because the Shakespeare, for some, I think would imply, white English Anglo dude. So what are you doing to say, we're more than this Anglo-English playwright, so to speak?
It's a good question. You know, as I think about it, I went to a conference a couple of years ago, and they actually talked about how Shakespeare had been a tool of colonization, and unfortunately has a bad rap in America because it was specifically used as a litmus test to talk about how cultured the American Indians were. And the indigenous people were, if they could understand the Shakespeare performances and laugh at the correct moments or whatnot, then they were seen as being civilized or cultured, and otherwise they weren't. They were viewed as savage, and so that became Shakespeare particularly was a demarcation point in our culture, and that's something that, you know, we look at. How can we decolonize Shakespeare? And so some of the things that we have been doing are things about focusing on natural voice, and that there is not a pre-requirement for the way you speak, and then also in our recruiting and our auditioning, making sure that we're specifically reaching out to certain populations, as far as the universities that we go to recruit our apprentices and our interns, and making sure that, you know, we're finding people from diverse backgrounds. I don't know, Melissa, if you have thoughts about other ways that, you know, what attracts you to want to perform Shakespeare?
Well, first of all, I think it's a specious argument because, you know, I've spent my life hearing that, well, you know, Black people are afraid of Shakespeare, or Shakespeare isn't for Black people, when in fact, you know, I think Black people are more in tune to Shakespeare than anyone else. If you look at wordplay, is huge in the Black community. All you have to do is listen to Snoop Dogg or any of the many phrases that Black culture has come up with 24/7, and, you know, all of the things that the phrases that have become common, the Black vernacular that is now very much popular among all cultures. Also rhetorical speak. You know, I have a dream, and all, you know, the whole call and response is a part of Black culture. So I actually think that we understand it a lot better than you think. And this idea that it's not for us because it's some, you know, white guy is actually not true. They just did a version of Merry Wives in the park, and they set it in a African culture, and it actually worked really well. And that's because of the understanding of the call and response in the African community, and the wordplay and all of that. So I think that's inaccurate, that, you know, people of color either don't understand it or are afraid of it.
I think there was a moment in American history where that changed, because Shakespeare used to be embraced by all cross sections of American society, until a particular riot that happened in New York in the mid 1800s, and because of that riot, it was the Astor Place riot. It's kind of a demarcation point that said Shakespeare is now going to be higher education, and other forms of entertainment are going to be, you know, kind of more for the masses. And so Shakespeare kind of got changed. And this didn't happen in England. It didn't happen in other parts of the world, but it happened in America, that Shakespeare was looked at as something that you needed to have a certain level of education and experience to understand, which is just not true. It's not in practice.
Thank you, guys. And so I just wanted to tell audience members too, that, you know, if you have a question that you think might be naive, or you don't know, ask it anyways, because we're learning. Okay, because I asked that question, did I know I was being naive? No, Melissa pointed it out. Thank you.
I wasn't. No, I didn't mean to say you were being naive.
You know what? No, but you're right. I learned something there. So thank you. And you, in a way, you were kind of on lines with what I was thinking, because I was thinking of you guys reinvent yourself with every play that I have ever seen Great River Shakespeare Festival perform, which, by the way, the first season was when I was 18. So I have been to every season since this last year. Sorry, guys. um, but my favorite Shakespeare play has always been A Midsummer's Night's Dream. And I saw one 2 years ago that I favorite, and it was so reinventive and different from what I've ever seen before. And so thank you for that. Thank you for reinventing the wheel and making it different and making it something that we are going to want to see again and again and again. So thank you for that. And again, Melissa, thank you, because I think this helps our audience members say, you know, don't be afraid to ask your questions. So I have one other question, and then if nobody has questions from the audience, then I'm just going to let everybody go. And that is for Jacqueline. And Jacqueline, it's kind of the same question. You guys are in Little Lanesboro. Sorry, I'm calling it Little Lanesboro. It's nestled in the bluff. It's a beautiful arts community, and Lanesboro really, in case you guys didn't know, Lanesboro really had to work to become this beautiful arts-oriented community. And so what is Commonweal doing to invite diverse, inclusive communities to Lanesboro? And again, I'm going on that stereotype of it. You guys are little.
No, it's fair. It is a small town. You know, I think we're just above 700, and that's residents. But we have a lot of people that come and visit, and then we also have some major surrounding communities. We're pretty close to Winona. We're pretty close to Rochester. We're close to Decorah and La Crosse. And I think, you know, it is similar to some of the answer to the last question, in that you know, we have work, and we are working really hard this year to diversify our casting and hiring effort. Now that we're actually at a place where we can hire again, that's a really big an important sort of cornerstone to all of the work we're doing right now, to make sure that we are reaching out to other communities that we maybe weren't targeting towards, so that we have more diverse representation within our apprenticeship as well as our seasonal hiring process, which the Commonweal model is based on a artist administrator model. And so oftentimes the people who join our artist administrator teams start as seasonals, share their talents on a particular project, and then they come back and they share their skills, their diverse skills in other ways as well. And so, in order for that pipeline to work, we need to continue to do that work of making sure we diversify the efforts at the very beginning as well. And so that is sort of a major focus right now for us as we gear up into a hiring season that we haven't been able to do for the last year and a half. But also, you know, relating to what Melissa was talking about, it is true that there are diverse communities here, small groups, and Eileen mentioned this as well. We may not know them, or they may be, you know, I as a white person may not be aware of the various diverse groups that are around us. And that takes work to make sure that we build relationships there and that we keep relationships there. And we're going to have to continue that work. I mean, a small way that we did that was making sure that we paid some people of color this year, and we brought them in when we can. We only had like a tiny couple of options to do that this year because we were forced to kind of be sort of the skeleton, bare bones of a company, just to the nature of producing in 2021. But whenever we had those opportunities, we looked seriously at making sure that we could add diversity to our teams in that way. And there are artists who were raised in these communities that are interested in working here again, whether they have gone off to New York and gone off to larger communities, the Twin Cities and whatnot, in Chicago. They're interested in coming back for a short time or for a long period of time. And we just need to make sure that they know that the opportunity is here. And so that is the biggest effort right now, is communicating that and building those relationships so that those bridges are continuously extended.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, audience members. This is just a reminder that in about 10 minutes, you're going to get a survey in your emails that I need everybody to fill out so that we can bring panels like this back to the library. There is an event tomorrow for our Waking Up Regional Read. You can find out more again on that website. And we also have a book chat coming up in Winona on Saturday, November 6th. Called Why Being Colorblind is Not a Good Approach. So that will be at Holdinger Lodge on Saturday, November 6th. And again, thank you all for attending the panel. I hope to see you again at another one. Thank you.